This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Abam, welcome everyone to another edition of our Wednesday night Shiur, Parshas Chayei Tafshin Ayin Hey. Parshas Chayei is the Parsha of marriage, of Shidduchim. So we'd like to discuss a very interesting topic this evening. Avram Avinu commissions his trusty servant Eliezer, and he makes him take an oath. V'ashbiacha v'Hashem Elokei Hashamayim Elokei Haaretz. He says, I make you swear by the name of God, God of heaven and earth. Asher lo yisikach isha levni mivnei saknani, asher anochi yoshev b'kirba. You better not take a woman for my son from the Canaanim. Rather, ki el artzi ve'el ma'ilad telech. Rather, you should go to my land, to my birthplace. V'lakachta isha levni li Yitzchak. And from there you should take a wife for Yitzchak. Okay, so the pasuk says that Avram Avinu is giving Eliezer very specific instructions of what type of wife to take for Yitzchak. Do not take a woman from Canaan. Rather, go to my land, my birthplace, take a woman from there. Ask the Meshech Chachma, very simple question. Eliezer's not the one getting married, Yitzchak's the one getting married. So if Yitzchak's the one getting married, let the father and son have the big talk, have the heart-to-heart talk, and let Avraham say to Yitzchak exactly who he would like or would not like Yitzchak to marry. Let Avram sit down with Yitzchak and say, look, Yitzchak, you're a good kid. You've been a good kid since you were young. By the Akedah, you didn't flinch. You did everything we asked of you. We're very proud of you. You make us very proud. The one request, do us a favor, don't take one of these Canaanite women. Why is Avraham giving instructions to Eliezer? Give instructions to your son. So here we come to a very important halacha. And that halacha is, we know there's a mitzvah in the Torah, Kaved es avicha v'yasimecha, honor your father and mother. Your father asks you for breakfast, for lunch, for supper, you got to bring it. Your father and mother ask you to get them dressed, you got to do it. They ask you for a drink, you got to do it. They ask you for something, you have to do what they ask you for. You can't contradict them, you can't argue with them, you can't disagree, you can't agree. But what if they tell you, we want you to marry Shprinza? We think Shprinza is a lovely girl. Or Yentala. We think Yentala is really for you. Or let's say, parents say to a son, this guy over here, we really like him. We want you to marry. And she says, I don't want to marry him. I want to marry Yankel. Does a child have to listen to his parent or her parent when it comes to Shidduchim? And the answer is, before I tell you the answer, let me give you a little introduction. You're not going to like everything I say tonight. This is not going to be a politically correct shiur. The Sma brings down in Choshe Mishpat a rule. And the rule, the words that he says, and we'll explain what this means. Piskei balabatim hepech mi piskei haTorah. That means like this. That means what you think, or what I think, or what your initial reaction is, or what my initial reaction is, my gut reaction, no, it can't be. You should know the Torah says the opposite. Because not everything that we think is what the Torah says. And even if at first it would seem to us foreign, alien, it's not logical, well, that's life. Life is training your mind to go against your base nature and to learn to try to think a little bit on a higher plane. And with that introduction, I'll tell you the straight out halacha. When it comes to Shidduchim, the Ramah in Yeridea, Siman Reish Mem, Siv Chaf Hey, says black and white. V'chein ima'av moicha beben lisa eza isha sheyach l'tzaben. The kid comes home, says, Tati, Mami, Abba, Ima, Daddy, Mami, guess who I'm marrying? I'm marrying this girl. And the father says, over my dead body, or no way. There is no mitzvah whatsoever to listen to a parent. The parent's opinion has no halachic validity when it comes to Shidduchim. But we'll see. Ein sarach lishmai alav. You don't have to listen to the father or the mother. Very surprising. There's a mitzvah in the Torah, kibbud av v'em. Whatever they tell you, you have to do. They want breakfast, brunch, lunch, midday snack, supper, midnight snack, you gotta. But when they tell you who to marry, who are not to marry, says Rama, there is no halacha, you have to listen to them. Where do we see this from? Says Rav Meir Simcha. We see this from Avraham, and now I'm going to tell you a good trick. You parents out there who are, pulling your hair out. What? There's no mitzvah? Well, I'm going to tell you a good trick. We see it from Avraham and Yitzchak, because Avraham never sat down with Yitzchak and said to Yitzchak, Yitzchak, I don't want you to marry a woman from Canaan. You know why he didn't say anything to him? Because that would be meaningless to him. He wouldn't have to listen. So what does Avraham do? Avraham says, Yitzchak, you're not the one sending out the messenger. I'm the one dealing with the shadchan. Eliezer, you're my servant. You'll do what I tell you. So if you want to have control over your kids' future spouses, don't tell them anything. You deal with the shadchan. You could tell the shadchan whatever you want. But to tell your kid, black and white, the Ramah says, the Ramah paskins like the Marik, and we'll see what the logic of the Marik is, that if a parent has an opinion about Shidduchim, ein tzarech l'shmaya el ha'av. Asked Rav Meir Simcha, well, if that's the case, let's turn our sheets to number 10. Next week's Parsha, Parshas Toldos. V'atoymer Rivka al Yitzchak, katzti b'chayei mimnei b'nois ches. I utterly despise those daughters of Ches. By the way, Rav Bick, who is a famous Rav, Masader Gittin, he wanted to be Masakein, that before a boy and girl gets engaged, they have to go out at least 8 times. Because he saw there were meetings, very short meetings, people didn't really get to know each other, and they would get engaged, and unfortunately it would end bad, so he wanted to be Masakein, that you have to go out at least 8 times. So when the Samer Rebbe heard about that, he said the following pasuk: Katzti b'chayai mipnei b'nois ches. I'm disgusted by this takana of 8 times. But Rav Vic said back to the Samer Rebbe, he said, you're a Masader Kedushin. I'm a Masader Gittin. So I know better. But that's legend has it that way. But that's irrelevant to what we're discussing tonight. Rivka says to Yitzchak, I can't stand the b'nois ches. If my son marries one of those girls, what do I need to live for? So what does Yitzchak do? Vayikro Yitzchak el Yaakov, vayevarech Oisa. Yitzchak calls Yaakov, he gives him a bracha, and he says, don't you dare marry one of those girls. So that's the Meshech Chachma. Here I just established that a proof to the halacha of the Ramah and the Marik, that a parent has no authority over his kid's Shidduchim, the proof is from the fact that Avram did not say a word to Yitzchak. Well then why did Yitzchak tell Yaakov who yes and who not to marry? Says the Meshech Chachma, a very interesting chiddush, and that is Yitzchak was not commanding him who to marry, who not to marry. Yitzchak was telling him one very simple thing. Before Yitzchak tells him who to marry, vayevarech Oisa, he gives him a bracha. Which bracha does Yitzchak give Yaakov? The Berachas Avram. Says the Meshech Chachma, what are the blessings of Avraham? The blessings of Avraham is the land of Eretz Yisrael. Well, the land of Eretz Yisrael is dependent, says the Gemara in Yevamos, on not intermarrying with the people of the land. So Yitzchak says to Yaakov, look, I can't tell you who to marry, who not to marry as a father. But one thing I can tell you is if you want these brachos, they're contingent and they're dependent on you marrying out of the women of Canaan. If you marry the Benois Canaan, you forfeit your rights to Eretz Yisrael and the brachos. So Yitzchak wasn't telling him who to marry, it was dependent on the brachos. That's why, if you look, Esav saw that Yaakov, when Yaakov got the brachos, and then he went to Padan Aram to get married. The psukim are very meduyak, that when Esav saw that in order to get the brachos, you can't marry from the Benois Canaan, so he followed suit. Okay, but again, the question that we would like to deal with is that if a parent has no authority over their kids' Shidduchim, then why is Yitzchak giving advice to Yaakov? Meshech Chachma answers it his way, and tonight we're going to offer a new answer to this question. Okay, let's come back to the halacha of the Ramah. The Ramah quotes the Marik. Let's read the words carefully. Number 3. V'chein ima'av moicha beben lisa ezo isha sheyachbotz v'haben ein tzarech l'shmaya alav. You don't have to listen to the father. Why not? What happened to the mitzvah of kabed asavicha v'yasimecha? Comes the Marik, and the Marik tells us 3 reasons why when it comes to Shidduchim, it is not the department of the parent. Again, you might not like this. If I was a parent, I am a parent, and thinking about this, it's not that pleasant. But this is the halacha. Why, says the Marik? Answer number 1, the first rationale. Also very interesting. The mother says, buy me lunch. I want a steak sandwich on rye with a pickle and root beer on the side. But you got to get it. Who pays for it? Who pays for it? It's a machlokes in the Gemara in Kedushin. Look at number 5. Mishal mi, who pays for it? Rav Yehuda Omer Mishal ben, the kid. Rav Nasan Maroshi Omer Mishal av. How do we paskin? Oyru le Rabbanan Rav Yirmiyah va'amri le lebreid Rav Yirmiyah Kamanda Amar Mishal av. The father has to foot the bill. It's halacha. Now it doesn't mean you're not allowed to pay for it, and it doesn't mean you're not doing a nice thing. But the question is, according to the halacha, who has to pay? The parent has to pay. What if the parent doesn't have money? So it's a machlokes haposkim. Then the kid has to pay. Either midin kibbut avayim or midin tzedakah. It's machlokes. But according to, if the parent has the resources, the parent has to pay. Says the Marik, if you don't have to spend money to honor your father or mother, you certainly don't have to give up a potential spouse who you would like to marry to honor your father or mother. If you don't have to even spend $1, then how could it be that you have to give up something so valuable as someone that you deem to be your bashart? It's not logical. It's not rational. You don't even have to spend money. So now you have to give up what could be tzara de gufa. If somebody wants to marry a certain person, and they have something invested in that, it could be very distressing for them, for the parents to say, no, marry someone else. You don't even have to give up money. You certainly do not have to give up a potential spouse, says the Marik. That's the first rationale. Second rationale. What's the halacha? Are you allowed to marry someone if you never saw them? You can't do it. The Gemara in Kedushin says, Asur la'adam she'yikadesh asayisha ad she'yirena. Look at number 7. You can't get married unless you see her. Why? The Gemara says a very interesting reason. Because maybe when you see her, you're not going to like how she looks. You didn't realize she has 2 noses, right? You didn't realize that.
So what a blind man do?
What? What is a blind man? Okay, we'll see. You'll see. Then there's no eitzah. There's no choice. You can't get married unless you see her. Why? Because you might not like how she looks, and you're going to violate a mitzvah in the Torah. It's a mitzvah to love every Jew. Now, you may have a difficult time loving someone who you don't like the way they look. Now, if you're not married to them, you could manage. You'll figure out a way to be mekayim v'yahavta l'recha kamoich. But now you're stuck with them, so you better take a look before you get married. What's the halacha if a parent tells you to do an avera? Do you have to listen? No. What if they tell you to violate D'Rabbanan? Do you have to listen? You don't have to listen. What if they tell you to violate a minhag? You don't have to listen. What if it's a chumrah? When it comes to halacha, you don't have to listen. Says the Marik, if you want to marry a certain person, and the parent says, no, we don't want you to marry Shprinza. Yenta has such a beautiful name. We'd rather you marry Yenta. You'll never be able to like Yenta the way you liked the one you want, Shprinza. And you're not going to be able to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Yahavta Recha Kamoicha. This is tantamount to a parent saying, do an Avera. A parent telling someone, don't marry A, marry B, is tantamount to the parent commanding the kid to do an Avera. What's the Avera? Now, let's just say one thing. The Marik makes it very clear, this is only Isha HaHigenaslai. This is only a fitting woman. That means she has to be an Isha Keshera, she has to have proper character, she has to have proper health. But when it's a matter of subjective quality, and the parent says, we like this girl, The other girl, the father's the Gabay Sheni. We will only let you marry a girl who the father is the Gabay Rishon. Are you kidding me? You're going to go out with the girl, her father is the Baal Musaf on the second day of Rosh Hashanah? We only go with the first day of Rosh Hashanah, Baal Musaf. So these type of things, the kid could say, look, this is who I want to marry, and if you're going to force me to marry someone else, I'll never be able to Mekayim the mitzvah of V'ya'afta l'recha kamecha. Third reason. Okay? Third reason. What if a parent says, when you go to camp, you better put your slippers neatly under your bed every night? Do you have to listen? Yeah. What if your parent says, whenever it's 60 degrees or cooler, you better wear a coat? And it's 59 degrees. Do you have to listen? You don't have to listen. There's no mitzvah in the Torah to listen. Is only if the parents have direct benefit from the request. For example, the Gemara in Kedushin says, Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, look at number 9. Tanur Abanan, Ezehu Moira, Ezehu Kibud. Moira loy oimed b'makaymai. You cannot stand in their place. If they have a special place they stand, you can't stand there. Lo yoshev b'makaymai, you can't sit in their place. V'lo soiser tevarav, you can't contradict them. V'lo machriya, you can't agree with them. Your father says a whole thing, you say, yeah, you're 100% right. No. Your father needs you to say that he's right. You're nothing. You don't express your opinion. You don't express your opinion. You don't disagree. You don't agree. And Ezel Kibud, what is Kibud? Machel, you feed them. Mashke, you give them to drink. Malbish, clothing. Machasa, Machnesumoitzi, you bring them in and out. But, says the Marik, we see from here that the definition of Kabbalah Savich V'Samecha is only if the parent has direct benefit from their request. Just because they make a request from you, if it's, so to speak, not their geschäft, that falls out of the jurisdiction of the mitzvah of Kabbalah Savich V'Samecha. No mitzvah. When is there a machlokes? Do you spend your money or their money? That's when you're getting them their sandwich. But let's say your parent says, I want you to eat roast beef for lunch. You could eat peanut butter if you want. There's no mitzvah in the Torah of Kabbalah Savicha. It's your lunch, it's not their lunch. So therefore, furthermore, what if the parent asks you to do something? Now, we're not saying you don't have to listen. It's not a nice thing to listen. You could listen to whatever they tell you. They're doing it for your benefit. They have good intentions. They know better than you. But you want to know, according to the halacha of Kabbalah Savich V'Samecha, this is not under the category of don't wake them up. No, that you can't do. You can't wake them up. If they're sleeping, you can't wake. Anything that directly affects their comfort or discomfort, that's Kabbalah Savich V'Samecha. Something that's outside of that. Now, what if the following? Even according to the Man Amra that you need to spend money on their lunch, you're walking down the street, your parent says, get me lunch, but you lost an object, and if you get them lunch, you won't be able to retrieve your object. So if they would ask you, buy me lunch, there's an opinion in the Gemara, you got to spend $100 to get them lunch. But now, they're willing to pay for the lunch. Now you have to suffer a loss of not retrieving your object. Or what if you have to take a day off of work? Are you obligated to lose work? No. Again, that's out of the jurisdiction of Kabbalah Savich V'Samecha. If they ask you, do me this benefit, you got to do whatever it takes. And now there's a machlokes whose money you spend. But if there is a coincidental loss, that is not part of the mitzvah of Kabbalah Savich V'Samecha. Says the Marik, who the son or daughter marries is out of the jurisdiction of the parent. The parent's not marrying them. The parent does, but the mother-in-law says, that girl has a schneer? No way! No. The mother-in-law only has to look at her, Sukkot, Pesach, maybe a Hanukkah party. But other than that, it's not under the mother-in-law's jurisdiction. It's not under the father's jurisdiction. My son, I'll tell my son who he's going to marry. No, you won't. That's why you better tell the shadchan. You make up with the shadchan before. Look, I can't tell my kid anything. I'm ordering now. This is what I want, this is what I don't want. But you tell, that's the trick. You got to buy like Avram Avinu. You know, Masa Avos Simin Labanim. Avram Avinu was a smart man. He knew he couldn't tell Yitzchak anything. So he tells Eliezer, look, you're my servant. You have to know who you're working for. You're working for me. You're not working for Yitzchak. Okay, these are 3 reasons the Marik brings down why when it comes to Shidduchim, if the woman is Isha Hagen, now if the guy, the girl wants to marry this guy, the guy's a bum. The guy's a bum. He's not Hagenes. He doesn't have good character. He has problems. So then, in that kind of case, the parent has a right to make a demand. But subjectively, subjective merit or demerit, subjective quality, not under the parent's jurisdiction for 3 reasons. Number one, if you don't have to spend your money, you don't have to give up a spouse. Number 2, it's tantamount to telling the kid to sin. And number 3, it's out of the parent's jurisdiction. And do we paskin like this? 100%. Is there any machlokes? No. This is one area of halacha that is unanimous. Nobody argues. But now the question is, what about a girl? This so far applies to a boy. The parent tells the kid, the son, marry her. No. What about a girl? Does a girl have to listen to her parents? You say, what's the difference? There's a very big difference. And the difference is, one second, excuse me. I want to mention one thing. Comes a Netziv, and the Netziv makes one qualification. And the qualification is that if this Shidduch will be a source of bizayon to the parents will be embarrassed, they will be ashamed, they will be absolutely disgusted by the Shidduch. Says the Netziv, in that case, the parents have the right to tell the son, no way. What's the difference? Says the Netziv, the Marik Svara was that a parent is only allowed to tell the kids something that's in their jurisdiction. But a Shidduch, it's not the parent's business. But if the Shidduch is going to be a source of bizyonos to the parents are going to be ashamed. Now when you talk about ashamed, we don't mean, the parent, like we said before, we don't mean, this guy is, he's the Gabbai Rishon, but his father was the Gabbai Sheni. No, we want Gabbai Rishon, ben Gabbai Rishon. It's ridiculous. These type of things are not objective qualities. But something that is objectively bizayon to the parent, then the Marik would say, normally the parent could say, this is not in my jurisdiction. But here, where this woman is going to be ashamed to the father and mother, the parents could say, this is our business. And then the Netziv says something unbelievable. If a parent says, do an Avera, you don't have to listen. What if the parent says, do me a favor, talk by Chazar Sashat? You can't listen. Because the father also has to listen to Hashem. The mother also has to listen to Hashem. But listen to this. Where do we learn that out from? From the drasha. Ish aviv v'imay tira'u v'es shabsoisei tishmayru ani Hashem. Kulchem chayavim b'chvaydi. Everyone has to honor God. Says in Netziv, that only teaches you that if it's a matter of honor or fear, then you have to honor God and not honor your parent. But if it's going to be a bizayon to a parent, then you could even do an Aveira so not to shame your parent. Because the limud, that you don't have to listen to your parent, is kulchem chayavim b'chvaydi. Don't honor your father. Your father has to honor God. But what if it's a matter of more than just honor? It's a matter of shame. So says in Netziv, it's a matter of shame. You're allowed to, then the parent has a right to demand, don't marry this girl. But if I don't marry this girl, I might not like my wife as much. It doesn't matter. Because this is a matter of disgrace to the parent. Disgrace to the parent, you could even put yourself in a situation where you might do an Aveira to avoid disgracing your parent. Okay, so this is the exception of the Netziv. Now you should know, not everything, a parent says, we're Ungarish. How dare you're going to marry a Galtsiana? You're going to marry a Hasidish, Litvish, Sfardi. This is not what we're talking about. Embarrassing is an objective, something that's really embarrassing. But we could say the following. Okay, we want to answer the Meshech Chachma's question. If Avraham couldn't tell Yitzchak who to marry, then how could Yitzchak tell Yaakov who to marry? I think it's a very pashut. That's why the Torah gives us an introduction. Vatoymer Rivka el Yitzchak. Katzti b'chayei. I am terribly disgusted with the Benois Ches. Rivka says, if he marries from the Benois Ches, lo malichayim. It's such a bizayon to me. It's such a disgrace to me that I can't bear to see him marry such a girl. Oh, in that case, so Yitzchak said, if you're really disgusted, Yitzchak goes over to Yaakov. He says, look, you can't marry this girl because this is above the pale. Abraham had a certain hakpada. Hakpada, you can't tell your kid. But if it's katzti b'chayai, perhaps in that case, then you're allowed to tell your kid. Okay. But now let's come back to the question. The question is, does a girl have to listen to her parent? So what's the difference? Very big difference. And the difference is that a man has a mitzvah. Mitzvah to get married and procreate. Pru-revu. A woman doesn't have that mitzvah. There's no mitzvah in the Torah for a woman to have children. The mitzvah was addressed to men, not to women. There are reasons. For the man, it's not a big deal. For her, it's painful. She has to. So Torah will not command somebody to do something that's difficult and painful to them. So the Baruch commanded men, not women. So maybe only a man who has a mitzvah to get married, if the parent says, marry this one and not that one, the kid could say, this is my mitzvah, I'll do it the way I need to do it. But a woman who b'chlal doesn't have a mitzvah to get married, woman doesn't have to get married. There's no mitzvah in the Torah for a woman to get married. We'll see about that. So the girl says, I want to get married and do a mitzvah. The father says, what mitzvah? There is no mitzvah. Why? Wait a year. Marry somebody that we both like. What's the rush? What's the rush? What's the rush? How often do we hear that? What's the rush? Maybe, no. Okay. So now we're going to discuss a little bit in Yana Diyayma. Remember, there was in the news, one of the advocates for the Temple Mount, man by the name of Yehuda Glick, Nebuch, he was shot. Baruch Hashem, he's making a recovery. He happens to be my first cousin. And his father, who is my uncle, my great uncle, is Professor Shimon Glick of the Medical Center of Soroka in Beersheba. And he asked the Tzitz Eliezer the following question. And this is the landmark tshuva on this topic. So hopefully, we'll give them good press for Davar Sheba Halacha. I don't advocate going to the Temple Mount. The Mishnah Berurah says you can't go there. The Rambam says you can't go there. Halacha is you're not allowed to go there. But he's a Yid. He happens to be my cousin. So he should have, Baruch Hashem should send for Shalema to Yehuda Yeshua Bas Ita Braina. For Shalema. So Professor Shimon Glick poses the following question to the Tzitz Eliezer. You have a girl. I happen to know who the girl was, but I'm not going to say who it was. And she's 20 years old, and she wants to get married, and the father says, what's the rush? Why don't you wait to the right time? Dr. Glick says, of course the Ramah says you don't have to listen to your parent, but that's a boy. But a girl has no mitzvah to get married. So what's the girl going to say? I want to get married? There's no mitzvah for her to get married. Comes the Tzitz Eliezer, and Tzitz Eliezer says, a very important halacha. There is no difference between a boy and a girl. The same way a boy does not have to listen to a parent when it comes to Shidduchim, neither does a girl. Why? Because the Marik gave 3 reasons why Kibbut Avayim does not apply to Shidduchim. Number 1, you don't have to spend money. Why do you have to put yourself in agony and marry someone you don't want to? Well, that applies to a girl also. A girl doesn't have to spend money. Why would she have to be stuck with some guy she doesn't want to marry? Number 2, for a parent to tell a kid who to marry, it's tantamount for the parent to tell the kid to do an Avera. So the same way, the husband has to love his wife because v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, well, it goes both ways. The wife's also a Jew, the husband's also a Jew. She has to make sure she's also mekayem v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. For the parent to tell her who to marry, who not to marry, that's also tantamount. You can't meddle in that. And number 3, the Marik said, it's not the parent's jurisdiction. Well, that applies to a girl as well. And therefore, says the Tzitz Eliezer, the Ramah says straight out, when it comes to Shidduchim, there's no difference between a boy and a girl. Says the Tzitz Eliezer in Chelek Yud Gimel, Siman Ayin Ches, I hold there's no difference between a boy and a girl. Asks Professor Gluck, what about the parent says, okay, you want to marry him? No problem. But not yet. Not yet. Maybe in a little while, when I'm ready. Could a parent say that? The parent's paying for the chasana, they could say whatever they want. But halachically, does a parent have a right to control dates of chasana? Says it's Tzitz Eliezer. Not at all. Parent has no say. The kid says, I want to get married. It's his mitzvah. They choose who. They choose when. Oh yeah, he'll have to pay for it, yeah. But you want to know, if all things being equal, and the parent says, yeah, here's the money, and you decide, well, then the kid will decide. Obviously, the one who has the credit card, he's the one who decides. But on halachic sense, okay. That's the end of the tshuva from Rebbe Lezer, Yehuda Waldenberg. That halacha l'maisa, this is an area of halacha which surprisingly is not controlled by a parent. As unsettling as it is, and everybody wants to control, I'm going to tell my kid exactly who they're going to marry, when, where, and what hour of the day. No, that's what we would like to think. But the halacha considers marriage a very personal thing. And there's a klal, lav mikol adam zoicha libanos, that there's something supernatural about a shidduch, that there's special hashgacha pratis, and a person sometimes has a certain sense that they're the only ones who could really know what's good for them. And as much as the parents are trying to do what's best for their kid, and as much as the parents love their kid, the bottom line is the halacha puts it in the hand of the kid to decide who and when. But here's the problem. Because the case is not finished with. Because there's a tshuva, in the Shas Tshuva's Torah Lishma, Rabbi Cheskel Kachli, the Rav Pa'alim, and he was asked, the father says to the daughter, listen up, I need you around the house. I need my slippers in the right place at all times. I need the newspaper to be brought in the morning. I need lunch exactly when I want. Princess, you ain't getting married. You're not getting married. You'll take care of me. Says the Torah Lishma, she's mechuyev to listen to her father. Why? Because there's no mitzvah in the Torah for a woman to get married. Not only that, there's no mitzvah in the Torah for a woman to have children. Not only that, there's no mitzvah for her, right? We know there's a mitzvah of Puravu, and there's a mitzvah of Sheves, and therefore, what's the girl going to say? I want to do a mitzvah. There's no mitzvah. You stay in the house with me. You'll take care of me. That's a mitzvah. That's a mitzvah. Says the Torah Lishma, halacha l'maisa, she has to listen to the parent, unless she comes up with a claim that if she's going to stay single, then she'll get into trouble, and she might do an avera, and in that case she has a right to override the rulings of her parent. So, in the 15th volume of the Tzitz Eliezer, they say, Rebbe Lezer Yehuda Waldenberg, nice psak in Chelek Yud Gimel, but guess what? The Shilas Teshuvas Torah Lishma that came 100 years before you, he disagrees. He disagrees. He says that if a parent tells their daughter not to get married, daughter has to listen. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, with all due respect to the Shilas Teshuvas Torah Lishma, he's 100% wrong. He's wrong. He's wrong. Number one, what's the reason a kid doesn't have to listen to the parent when it comes to marriage? The Marik said, because if you don't have to spend money, you don't have to put yourself in sar. So there's no difference between a man and a woman. What's the difference? Why, if the woman doesn't have to spend money on her parents' lunch, then why would she have to marry someone she doesn't want to marry? Bichlal, says the Tzitz Eliezer. It is more, a woman is more lonely, a woman who's not married is more lonely than a man who's not married. Chazal say, more than a man wants to get married, the woman wants to get married. She needs it even more. Chazal say, Tav l'meitan tam du l'meisav armalu. Chazal say that a woman, she's not that picky. She doesn't really care as much exactly what the husband looks like or these type of things. Men could be picky. Women just want the company. That's what Chazal say. You could shake your heads. You could say, no way, this can't be true. I'm telling you the rules of the universe. There's gravity, and there's E equals mc squared, and there are laws of the conservation of matter. Those may or may not be true. But one thing I'll tell you is true. Tav l'meitav tandum l'meisav. If the Gemara tells you a principle, if the Gemara tells you a chazaka, this is the way the world works. Doesn't matter 1013, 2013, 14, 3014. That's the way the world works. And therefore, for the husband, if a parent tells the daughter, well, no, I don't have to spend money, I don't have to put myself in sar. And the other reason of the Rama, of the Marik says this is not in the parent's jurisdiction. So what's the difference, a boy or a girl? And therefore the Tzitz Eliezer said, and he says, we're going to say it even further. We're going to say it further. There's a mitzvah on a father to marry off his daughter. It's a pasuk in Yirmiyah. In Yirmiyah, Parak Chav Tes, pasuk Vav, it says, Ve'es b'noi seichem tenu la'anoshim. Marry off your daughters to men. So the father has a mitzvah to marry off his daughter. Plus, now, the Shas Chuvas Lishma says like this. Listen to this. That if the daughter claims that she won't behave properly if she doesn't get married, then she doesn't have to listen to the parents. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, the Rambam already paskined that a woman has to try to get married so she doesn't put herself under suspicion. So of course she's commanded to. Of course she has to. And says the Tzitz Eliezer, it's a myth. Pru Revu doesn't apply to women, but the mitzvah of Loisayu Bira L'Sheves Yitzara, that applies to women also. Women are commanded in that mitzvah. Women are commanded to try, if they're able to fill up the universe. So it's not even true that women don't have a mitzvah. So therefore, says the Tzitz Eliezer, for all the above reasons, as great as a Torah Lishma is, and I'm sure his Torah was certainly learned Lishma, but nevertheless, we dismiss and we reject his psak. And then the Tzitz Eliezer says, a good trick. Why didn't the Torah Lishma write that even though I paskin, a daughter doesn't have to listen to her parents, but the Noida Yehuda says she does, and the Mechtam LeDavid says she does, and the Marik says she does, why didn't he list all the poskim that disagree? You know why? Because he didn't know all the poskim disagree. But if he would have done his research and learned how all the poskim disagree with him, he would have retracted. And therefore, says the Tzitz Eliezer, we summarily dismiss the ruling of the Torah Lishma. Halacha Lamaisa, there's no difference between a boy and a girl. This is a decision that the halacha leaves up to the individual. Now, we're not saying if your parent has a recommendation and a suggestion, you should probably listen to it. They probably know what they're talking about more than you. You don't know anything. You're 20 years old, 21, 22. You don't know anything about anything. But nevertheless, according to the halacha, this is a situation, this is an area where the Torah places it in the hands of the individual. You ready for this case? Unbelievable case. Shailas Teshuvas Noida Yehuda, Mardura Tinyana, Evan Oezer, Simon Memhe, number 15. Okay, I can tell you a story now. Very easy to remember all the characters. Shimon and Levi. Yeah? Got it? Shimon and Levi. Their father was Yaakov. Shimon, single guy, not getting any younger. Levi has a daughter. She's not getting any younger. Perfect situation. Shimon, the uncle, he's eligible. Levi has a daughter eligible. Now, are you allowed to marry your niece? Yes. Yeah, now you're allowed to. According to the Gemara, it's a mitzvah to marry your niece. It's the best shidduch. The Gemara in Yevamah says, the best shidduch is when you marry. Now, we don't do it anymore. But in Medina, the Gemara, it was a good idea. Fine. Now, this was such a beautiful shidduch. Yaakov, the grandfather, he's kvelling at the idea that my son is going to marry my granddaughter. Yeah? And, by the way, Shimon and Levi not only were brothers, they were business partners. They loved each other. Levi says, Shimon, I have a girl for you. Shimon says, who? Levi says, Bas Levi. Shimon says, how much are you giving me for the Nadan? Levi says, I'll give you 50,000. Shimon says, are you kidding me? I'm worth 100,000. Get lost. I want more money. You want me to marry your daughter? You get what you pay for. I want more money. Levi's very insulted. Levi can't believe that his brother's turning down his own niece because he wanted more money. I mean, come on. So says the Noid Yehuda, this caused a little unrest, a little discord, but nevertheless, business continued. They still continued to get along. What happens? Levi got very sick. He falls onto his deathbed. Levi's in his final hour. Meanwhile, Shimon's coming to visit Levi every minute, every hour. Levi turns to his wife. He says, I have one more minute left in this world. Don't you dare let Shimon marry our daughter. This is my last tzava. Don't you dare let that creep go anywhere near my daughter. And he dies. The day after Levaya, the Zayda comes, Yankel comes. He says to the Almana, I have a wonderful shidduch for the Einokol. Shimon! And everyone in the city, and the Rav, and all the Rabbanim, and the Rebbes, everyone comes. It's the perfect shidduch. And the woman doesn't know what to do. Because mitzvah l'kayim divrei hamei. She doesn't want to go against her husband's last will and testament. And here's the kasha that the Shoyl in the Noid Yehuda wants to know. What should this girl do? On the one hand, the father said he doesn't want her marrying Shimon. Mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis. This question was posed to a rabbi in the times of Noid Yehuda. Says the rabbi, you're worried about mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis. You're worried. Mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis is not a mitzvah in the Torah. It's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis. You should forget about mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis. He's your father. Honor your father. Your father says don't marry him. So you have to honor your father. Says the rabbi, but your mother says, marry him? Now what do you do if your father says, I want the Sprite, and your mother says, I want the Sprite, and you only have one can of Sprite? Who do you give it to? Father. Why the father? Because the mother also has to listen to the father. But what if they get divorced, and the father says, give me the Sprite, and the mother says, give me the Sprite? Who do you give it to? Pick them. The line is equal. They're equal. Pick them. So what about, in this case, so now the father says, don't marry Shimon. The mother says, marry Shimon. So you say, pick them, and plus you have mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis, so you should listen to that. No! Says the rabbi in the Shiloh, the Noid Yehuda, when do you say pick them? That's only by divorce. But if one of if the father or mother dies, even though the father is not alive, the mother is still meshubet to the dead father. Gerushin breaks the relationship. But Misa, Hanehavim b'chayeyem uvemoisam lo nefradu. Says the rabbi in the Tshuva of Yehuda, when one spouse dies, they still have responsibilities to the other spouse. And therefore, if the parents are divorced and one says, get me a drink, the other says, get me a drink, it's pick'em. But here the father died. Oh, the father died. The mother still has to listen to the father. And the father says, don't marry Shimon. The mother says, marry Shimon. Who's more important, the father or the mother? The father. So really the rabbi says, you should listen to your father and you can't marry Shimon. The only thing is, the Ramah paskins that when it comes to Shidduchim, the parent has no say. So therefore you don't have to listen to your father because this is not under his jurisdiction. But if Shidduchim were under the parent's jurisdiction, even though the father, Rahman Zan, died, you would have to listen to the father over the mother. When are they equal? That's by divorce. But by death, the mother is still considered under the auspices of the father. That's what the rabbi in the Tshuvas Noid of Yehuda says. Comes the Noid of Yehuda, and he says, I don't know what this man is talking about. The mother has to listen to the father in Olam Haba? She has to be mechabed the father. The father says, don't marry Shimon. The mother says, marry Shimon. You listen to the father because the mother also has to listen to the... What are you talking about? Could a woman get remarried if the husband dies? Of course. What do you mean? She has to listen to the father. She's still meshubed to the father. The father in Olam Haba, every day she's still ironing his shirts. The father's dead, it doesn't matter. No. Says the Noid of Yehuda, there's no such thing. The same way Gerushin makes it pick'em, right? Like we said, that if the father and mother both say Hashkeni Mayim, in that case it's pick'em. By Misa it's also pick'em. Because the same way Gerushin breaks the relationship, unfortunately so does Misa. And therefore, says the Noid of Yehuda, if Shidduchim was under the jurisdiction of the parent, and the father would say, marry, and the mother would say, don't marry, then what would we say? Then we would say, pick 'em, because the Misa breaks the relationship. But now, the only thing is that Shidduchim is not under the jurisdiction of the parent, and therefore you don't have to listen to the father. Comes Rabbi Kiva Eger. Okay, you ready for this? Comes the Rabbi Kiva Eger in the Tshuva. Again, the Noid of Yehuda feels that the same way Gerushin makes it, the father and mother are now on equal playing fields, the same thing with Misa. Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, I disagree with the Noid of Yehuda. Why? Ready for the following case? Case in the Beis Yosef. Comes along the Beis Yosef, and the Beis Yosef says, the mother leaves in a tzava, that when she goes, she wants the son to say Kaddish for her. So, Rahman al-San, the mother passes away, and son wants to say Kaddish. The father says, I don't want you to say Kaddish. It's an ayin hara. I'm still alive. Who do you listen to? The mother who left in a tzava to say Kaddish? Or the father? Says the Beis Yosef, you could take a look on your sheet, says the Beis Yosef, in number 17, that if the mother says say Kaddish, and the father says don't say Kaddish, you have to listen to the father. Why? Because honoring a father is on a higher level than honoring a mother. Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, the Noid of Yehuda said, listen carefully, Noid of Yehuda said that in the case where Levi died, and Levi told his daughter, I don't want you to marry Shimon, and Levi's wife tells his daughter, marry Shimon. Noid of Yehuda paskins, listen to your mother. You know why? Listen carefully. Because honoring the living is more important than honoring the dead. Because even though the Gemara says in Kedushin that mitzvah l'chabdoi b'chayim, mitzvah l'chabdoi l'achar misa, Says the Noda B'Yehuda, the Iker mitzvah of kavod is to the Chayim. La'achar misa, the mitzvah of kibbud av v'eim is not a full mitzvah. It's not complete. The Iker kibbud av v'eim is mechayim. And that's why the Gemara says in Masechta Kiddushin, Noda B'Yehuda says like this. Noda B'Yehuda says that in Kiddushin, the Gemara says Rav Asi was leaving Eretz Yisrael. He was coming out toward his mother, and at the end he heard that his mother's not alive Nebuch anymore. They're bringing out the Aron. Rav Asi says, then I wouldn't have gone out. Says the Noda B'Yehuda, why wouldn't he go out? He has to honor his mother La'achar Misasa. Says the Noda B'Yehuda, see from here, La'achar Misasa, the kibbud is not really a full chiyuv. So Noda B'Yehuda says that if the mother who's alive says marry Pliny, and the father who died said don't marry her, if Shidduchim was under the auspices of the parent, more important to listen to the living mother because she's mechayim than the father who's not mechayim. So the Noda B'Yehuda established two principles. Number one, Misa terminates the relationship. Number two, it's a more important mitzvah to honor the chayim than the mesim. Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, I argue with the Noda B'Yehuda on two accounts. Listen carefully. Because the Beis Yosef paskins that if the mother says, say Kaddish, and the father, who's alive, says, I don't want you saying Kaddish, it's an ayin hara, the halacha in the Beis Yosef is you're not allowed to say Kaddish, you have to listen to the father. Why? Says the Beis Yosef, because, no, that's what I thought he would say. Because it's a bigger mitzvah to honor the father than the mother. Why, asked Rabbi Kiva Eger, does the Beis Yosef say that it's a bigger mitzvah to honor the father than the mother? Why doesn't Rabbi Kiva Eger, why doesn't Beis Yosef say that the father's alive and the mother's not alive, and there's a bigger mitzvah to honor the chayim than the mesim? Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, we see from here, the fact that the Beis Yosef didn't use that differentiation between the father and mother, the living and the dead, kibbud av v'eim, are equal. Why did the Beis Yosef have to say, well, there's a bigger mitzvah of the father more than the mother? Why get into the politics of it? Just say it's very simple. Father and mother are equal, but the father's alive, the mother's not alive. The answer is there's no difference between the living and the dead. We see not like the Noda B'Yehuda. And on a second account, we see not like the Noda B'Yehuda. What do you mean the father, it's a bigger mitzvah to listen to the father and the mother? It's only a bigger mitzvah to listen to the father than the mother if they're married. But once the mother is Na'olam ha'emes, they're not married anymore, and the Noda B'Yehuda would say, the same way by divorce, if the parents both say something, it's pikum. By death, it's also pikum. So what do you mean it's a bigger mitzvah to listen to the father? Not if they're not married anymore. How could the Beis Yosef say it's a bigger mitzvah to listen to the father? It must be not like the Noda B'Yehuda, that by Misa, by Gerushin, the relationship is terminated. By Misa, it's Hanehavim b'chayeyem u'v'maisam lo nefradu. Bottom line, they both agree. Now, what would you say about the following case? It would come out, Machloikes lahalacha. If the father ordered to say Kaddish, and the mother who's alive says don't say, so the Beis Yosef would say what? Beis Yosef would say, well, in that case, it's a bigger mitzvah to listen to the father. The father said Kaddish, but the father's not alive, doesn't matter. Bigger mitzvah to listen to the father and the mother. That's what Rabbi Kiva Eger would paskin. No, he would paskin, no. No, he would paskin, it's a bigger mitzvah to listen to the chayim than the mesim. Okay. But again, this is all academic, because bottom line is, the Ramah paskins like the Marik, that for three reasons, when it comes to Shidduchim, parents don't have jurisdiction, lahalacha. Now, we mentioned, let's just conclude with the following. What? The three reasons. Reason number one, you don't have to spend money on the parent, you don't have to give up the tsar of marrying someone you don't want to marry. Number two, the parent telling the kid who not to marry is tantamount for the parent saying to do an avera, right? Because it says in Marik, you wouldn't be able to muster up the same ava to someone you don't want to marry. And number three, it's out of the jurisdiction. It's not relevant to them. It's not part. Okay. But we said the Meishav Davar, the Netziv says, if the spouse will be a source of bizayon to the parent, in that case, based on the Marik's third reason, remember this? The Marik said it's not the parent's geschäft. But if it's a source of bizayon to the parent, then Netziv says, in that case, the parents have a right to protest. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, we don't paskin like the Netziv. That even if the spouse would be a source of bizayon to the parent, the Netziv only meant, listen to what he says, that according to the third reason of the Marik, the third reason is it's not the parent's geschäft. So if it's a bizayon, then it's part of their domain. But says it's Tzitz, but according to his first two reasons, that you don't have to spend money on the parent, so why do I have to give up a potential spouse? Or I have a mitzvah v'yaftal recha. Chumash says the Tzitz be'ikar we would go like the first two reasons of the Marik. And even if you want to follow the Netziv, this is very important yesod. The concept of tsar or bizayon to the parent cannot be a subjective bizayon. It can only be what's found in the Gemara. And the Gemara gives very exact definitions. Number one, the Gemara says she's a mekolkelas. If she's of bad character, not even if it won't affect the parent, but she acts improperly, she's not shomer halacha properly, that would be something that's an objective reason for a parent to, or if there's a health issue, that could be an objective reason. However, if, says the Tzitz Eliezer, if it's just a matter of this family, they eat gebrucks, and I'm going to let my kid marry into this family. This family, the mother pushes her shopping cart in the supermarket, right? Or this family, they use plastic Friday night. So these are all subjective reasons, which obviously, as much as the parents say how important it is to them, lehalacha, it's not something that's binding. So again, according to the strict halacha, the Ramah writes black and white, this is an area that is left up to the discretion of the individual. And the Chazon Ish writes, why is that? Why is that? Chazon Ish says, the same way there's a concept of batel ritzayncha lefnei ritzayn avinu shebashamayim. Sometimes there's an idea of batel ritzayncha mibnei ritzayn acherim. That as much as a parent thinks, this is my kid, and I'm going to tell them what to do, and how to do it, and when to do it, says the Chazon Ish, there comes a time where the Rebbe Shalom says, you know what? Part of life, like the Chavos HaVava says, part of life is to become kemalachim hasovim, like a tolerant angel. Tolerant angel is, not everything will go the way that you plan and want. And the same way, sometimes you have to be mevatel ritzayncha b'fnei ritzayn ha'makayim. Sometimes you have to learn to be mevatel ritzayn acherim, even if it's someone in your own family. And therefore, when it comes to Shidduchim, we're certainly, Chazal say, b'Torah, b'Neviim, b'Ksuvim, may Hashem isha lish. There's special siyata d'shmaya. The Rebbe Shalom is pulling the strings. And there's very little that anyone could do about it, even sometimes the person getting married. So under these circumstances, we understand if it's something that's improper, if it's something that's not correct, of course, you have to make sure everything goes kahalachu kahagen. But sometimes where there's subjective things, so this is one of the challenges of life, and we should all be zoicha that we should make shidduchim hagunim benachas ubebracha v'atzlacha ad biyaskol tzedek me'er yameinu amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.